Open Line on a Monday night here on News Channel 5 Plus. Rhori Johnston with you. John Navin is here from John Navin and Associates as we talk about all things financial, including investment options. And earlier we talked about all the hidden fees and costs that are inside mutual funds, and it's just a big education here. And we want to talk a little bit about the average return, which, if you were to ask me what's average return, I would say right now how the market's doing. What is it? 8%, 7 or 8%. You know, it's
20
like
years.
you said, we've been doing okay lately.
The market is about 9% for the last 20 years. The interesting part of that, though, is the average return for the average investor. So the market may have done 9%, but then we have this risk factor that comes in, and then there's two other factors that come in called fear and greed. And so what happens, just like you were mentioning a group sitting around talking about the 401k and this fund last month or 3 months ago, look at the return on that, I'm going to jump into this one, and I'm going to jump into this one.
It's a shell game.
And the
just
average,
moving it around. And
the average is about 2%. 2.3% is the average investor return for the last 20 years. Because they think they made the wrong choice, so they jump over to the other fund, and then that one starts to go down, like, oh my gosh, but I can make more over here. Oh, but I made that. And so it's this mental game that goes back and forth, and they end up averaging 2%. And they think, oh wait, I looked at my statement, it says I averaged 8%. No, the fund did. But you didn't, because you were in and out. Because then I come in and they say, well, my account went from 100 to 103,000. I say, okay, what was your average return? 8. No, it was 3%. Look, this is what you went from here to here. That's what your real number is. So
interesting. And risk is subjective.
Yeah.
Obviously, I mean.
So that's where it's important to really. Again, I'll stress the importance of finding someone to work with, because we have an attachment to the money, but not the same attachment that you do. You are emotionally attached to it. I keep pointing to you. All y'all are emotionally attached to it, whereas we can look at it subjectively and we can look at it with rationale. Whereas if we see something as an investment advisor, we could say, okay, let's move based upon this or this or this. Whereas an average person doing the investing, if they lose $20,000 or if they lose $200,000, that's a lot of money. And so now they think, oh my gosh. So we've got to make sure we're invested with the right allocation, the right level of risk, but then you almost have to release it.
You mentioned the issue of the government debt. Mm-hmm. What about personal debt? You know, I hear so much about it that maybe it's getting better, but you know, I still get credit card offers in the mail constantly that I just tear up and toss. But how big of an issue is that if someone comes to you, they want to be a client, they've got some money, but you know, they're drowning in debt?
Yeah, you've got to take care of the debt first. Yeah. And there's good debt and there's bad debt. So, in my opinion, good debt is your home mortgage, because you can write off that interest and you can deduct that. Even a home equity loan is not bad interest, or bad, because you can still, in most cases, not all, in most cases you can still deduct that interest. So if people are looking to get out of debt, those would be two places where you could go, and that would be a good form of debt. The problem we had, or what caused 2007 to 2008, the crash and the housing bust, is that we were buying all kinds of stuff on credit cards, but then we were refinancing our house because the house was going up, so we'd refinance the house to pay off the debt, and then we would just do it again 3 years later because the value of our home went up, so we could borrow more money. Well, then what happens is when the market starts to slip and fall back, we implode. So debt is still bad, very, very bad. Home and second mortgage is not so bad. But car and credit cards, you know, we talked about the time value of money. If you're, you know, losing, if you bought that big screen TV for $2,000 and you also financed it, well, now you're paying 16% on the $2,000, so you didn't even pay for it yet. So anytime we can get rid of debt first, that's going to be the most important thing.
And it's about discipline.
Yes. Yeah.
It's hard for some people.
It's very, very hard. I will say, in 2005, it hit me. I was sitting in my front yard in a home I had in Wisconsin, so I had a summer home, and I looked around, and I had boat, and I had snowmobiles, and I had to go clean this up and fix this, and you know, I had a mortgage there, and I had a mortgage at my house in Chicago, and I was like, why do I have all this stuff? So it was at that point in 2005, it was a July evening, sitting in my front driveway, because I still had to drain the gas out of the snowmobiles, I had to go cover the boat, and I thought, this is stupid. I'm not living my life based upon what's important to me. So I think what happens now, we're starting to see more and more of it. People are going to step back and go, what's really important in my life, and how do I make sure my finances are built around that, and I'm not buying a bunch of stuff that I don't care about.
That's so important.
Yeah. So that was really the
stuff.
Yeah,
the stuff.
We don't need stuff.
All right, I want to tell folks again, put up on the screen a little bit about this stress test and an offer that John is putting out there for our viewers today. So if you call in and say, hey, I saw you on OpenLine, you can come into John's office and do this stress test, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So they'll come in, and what'll happen? Set the appointment.
We'll set the appointment. So we'll find a good time, convenient time to meet. Come in. It's a very, very non-threatening time. It's just going to be questions and answers. We'll ask questions of the individuals who come in. They'll have questions for us. Eventually, if they feel comfortable, share your statements with us. We'll take your statements, put them into our portfolio stress test, and then come back with the results a week or so later that basically says, here's how much risk you're taking, here's where we see some opportunities that you may not be aware of, here's how much costs or your fees are. If the market corrects again, here's what could happen to your portfolio. And then basically begin a conversation, if they'd like, about income planning and creating these different buckets. But they'll walk out with an 8-page document that has some really, really good information, and they'll know if there's any shortfalls. It's kind of like going to the doctor. You know, if you're going to have a heart attack, I'd rather know before I have the heart attack than after I have the heart attack.
If there's a high risk here and that you need to make some changes.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So,
if you'd like to call in, we got a couple of minutes left. 737+ is the phone number here, 615-737+. John's third visit with us, I believe. Yeah. We've covered a gamut of different topics, but there's just so many things to talk about. Do you have the TVs on in the office all day where you're watching the stock tickers, or no? No. You're just focused on the work that you have to do, and
you're creating a plan. So what happens is once we create the plan, so they go through the portfolio stress test. If folks want to do something from that point on, then we start to say, okay, what would you like to do? First of all, we have to analyze, is there a problem? Some people come in and don't have a problem. And there's nothing we can do. Some folks say, yes, I see the problem, but you're not the guy to fix it. And that's okay too. Some folks say, yes, I see the problem, but how do you guys help?
Right.
And that's where we start to go to work and create the plan. So once the plan is created, and that's one of the biggest mistakes I see, most people do not have a financial or an income plan. They're just doing it haphazard and putting it out there. You need to have a written financial plan that you can follow. It doesn't mean you won't change it or you won't modify it, because you will. So what we'll do is more of the planning up front, allocate the funds, allocate stuff. So what we're doing on a day-to-day basis is meeting with clients and enhancing the relationship. So we see our clients quarterly. They come in, we sit down, what's changed, how's life, what's new in your world, what do you want to see differently, what are some goals for the next quarter, the next year, you know, they've got kids or grandkids. The investment advice, though, we do, that happens as well. So we have to do a lot of research.
So when you say a written plan, it's almost like a mission statement?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. Right.
Yep.
And how long does it take to get that plan together? Or it's something that you suggest, or is it something you work on collaboratively?
Oh, collaboratively.
Yeah.
Because every one of them is custom. Yeah. So we may look and say, okay, here's some things that we see, but we're going to create a custom plan based upon what's important to you. Right. And nobody comes in with the same set of items.
Someone could come to you and say, John, when I retire, I'm going to go live in a very simple log cabin in the woods, and I'm going to barely spend any money. I don't, whatever, but anything else that I have, I want to leave to my kids or grandkids, or I want to do this with it. Fine.
Cats.
Okay, let's. Yeah.
I have a multi-million-dollar client that is leaving a portion of the money to cats, because that was important to what. Okay. So pets, it can be anything.
Right.
Yeah. So it's never the same.
What about, real quick, we only have 1 minute. Okay. I've heard someone on the radio talking about the death tax and saying, don't die in New York State. Yeah. You know, talking about the states with and without the death tax.
That's changing. Tennessee's currently was like 3.5%. the death tax, but there was also an estate tax, which is something else people refer to if you die with more than $5 million, a little bit more than $5 million. As an individual, then you have to pay estate tax. So that could be a whole different conversation that we can dive into, but something definitely to address.
Sure.
To make sure everything's good. So
after you die, they come in.
Oh yeah, they come back after you. You made too much money. You did too well.
I'm not going to get too political here on this show, folks, and give you a commentary about how I feel about that. We're going to take our final break just in time. We'll be back right after this.